The air conditioning hummed, low, steady, and impersonal like the breath of a machine watching without feeling. Room 607 of the Seminole Hard Rock Hotel in Hollywood, Florida, was dim in the corners, despite the sunlight pressing hard through drawn curtains. There was a smell of perfume, old fries, and baby lotion. The television was off. She hadn't turned it on that morning. Anna lay awkwardly on the carpeted floor beside the bed, one leg bent, one arm splayed, the plush white robe slipping open at the chest. Her long blonde hair fanned beneath her like a halo in disarray. A crushed hamburger, untouched, rested on the nightstand. Her suitcase sat half-zipped near the door. The clock on the nightstand blinked 8:43 a.m. But no one could say for sure when her heart had stopped. It was the 8th of February, 2007. The day before, she'd complained of a fever, shivering under blankets, her speech slow and disoriented. She had refused to go to the hospital. Howard K. Stern, her lawyer, companion, sometimes lover, was with her that night. So was her private nurse. But no one knew exactly what Anna had taken. Methadone, chloral hydrate, Valium, Ativan, Klonopin. The hotel fridge contained more than 11 different prescription drugs, many written under other names. She had left no note, but on the desk, there was a black and white photo of her late son Daniel tucked into a notebook, a torn receipt from the Bahamas, a pink baby sock, a single silver hoop earring. The body was removed 5 hours later through the service exit. Cameras caught the stretcher being wheeled past slot machines and mirrored walls her final departure, not through red carpet but linoleum. And yet, somehow, the silence in that room never left. In the aftermath, journalists whispered about her weight, her erratic behavior, her final days. They called her death inevitable. But the woman on the floor that morning had once been electric, larger than fame, hungrier than money, and somehow both a parody and a prisoner of the world she'd built. The autopsy would reveal a lethal cocktail. Accidental, they said. But there were no clear answers about who gave her what or why she was left alone for 2 hours before the nurse called 911. Was she asleep or already gone when Howard checked on her that morning and saw her snoring? Why had no one listened when she whispered to a friend the night before, "I don't want to die like Marilyn"? The death certificate listed combined drug intoxication, but the words felt clinical, detached like trying to explain a broken heart with science. The motif of mirrors loomed large. There was one above the dresser, smudged. Another on the closet door, cracked slightly at the edge. Anna had always been fascinated by mirrors, even as a child. She once said they were the only place she could see the person people expected to see. But in death, mirrors reflect nothing, just absence. And in that still hotel room, beneath the whirring hum of the air conditioning and the soft rustle of a curtain no one touched, it seemed the world had finally caught up to Anna Nicole Smith, and it had arrived not with thunder, but with quiet. Before the whispers of scandal, before the courtroom battles and the red carpets, she was just Vicky, a quiet girl with wide eyes and a laugh too loud for the small, dusty streets of Mexia, Texas. She was born Vickie Lynn Hogan on the 28th of November, 1967, under a sky stretched flat and gray, in a town that seemed more like a punctuation mark than a sentence. Her mother, Virgie, was a deputy sheriff, hard, practical, and stretched thin. Her father disappeared early, leaving behind only rumors and a void Vicky would spend a lifetime trying to fill. She grew up in a one-story house with thin walls and a flickering porch light, the kind of place where ambition is treated like an affliction. But Vicky wasn't like the others. She wore makeup too young, stared at herself in mirrors too long. She loved the way Marilyn Monroe looked in old magazine pages, fragile, powerful, luminous. She dropped out of high school in her sophomore year. Her teachers said she was sweet but distracted. She said she didn't need school, she needed out. At 17, she married Billy Smith, a cook at Jim's Crispy Fried Chicken. They had a son, Daniel, a year later. But the marriage dissolved almost as fast as it began. And Vicky found herself alone with a baby and bills, working double shifts at the fried chicken place, grease collecting in her hair like sweat. She hated the way her name sounded when people said it. Vicky felt too small, too sticky with failure. So she began to invent a new self. She moved to Houston and worked as a dancer at Gigi's Cabaret. The stage name came easily, Anna Nicole. Two soft, elegant syllables that sounded like a secret too expensive to share. Her body changed. So did her voice, her walk, the way she smiled. There was always a smile. Huge, cinematic, sometimes vacant, as if she were watching the world from somewhere far behind her own eyes. By 1992, she had posed for Playboy. By 1993, she was Playmate of the Year. Photographers loved her. Editors called her the next Marilyn. But even then, she was unstable, drifting in and out of shoots. Late, high, confused. In interviews, she repeated a single phrase like a mantra. I just want to be loved. There was something almost mythic about the transformation of Vickie Lynn Hogan into Anna Nicole Smith. Like a caterpillar willing itself into a butterfly with nothing but hunger and delusion. But even fairy tales carry warnings. And Anna's had shadows. Friends from her early days recall a girl who cried easily, who clung to anyone who offered protection, a girl who dreamed too loud and fell in love too fast. One remembered finding her one night in the back of a club, staring into a mirror, whispering to herself, "You're going to be someone. You have to be someone." The motif of mirrors returned, again and again. They were her portals, tools of transformation, symbols of longing. But a mirror can't love you back. It can only show you what you wish was true. In Mexia, people still spoke her name with a mix of awe and pity. The girl who made it out. The girl who became someone. The girl who never looked back. But even as Anna's name began to shimmer in the tabloids, the small-town silence she came from never stopped echoing inside her. A child bride, a single mother, a dropout turned goddess. Fame would take her name, her voice, her son, and eventually her life. But back then, in the blurred heat of a Texas summer, all she wanted was to be more than invisible. And for a moment, she was. The wedding photo was strange even by tabloid standards. He sat in a wheelchair, frail, and draped in a tuxedo-like fabric on a coat hanger. She stood beside him, laughing, head tilted back, a vision in white satin and diamonds. It was 1994, and Anna Nicole Smith had just married J. Howard Marshall II, an 9-year-old oil tycoon worth hundreds of millions. She was 26. The headlines wrote themselves Gold Digger Mary's Fossil, but Anna, smiling for the cameras with her signature foggy voice and high-arched eyebrows, insisted it was love. She said he made her feel safe. He said she made him feel alive. But behind the spectacle was a story far murkier than a punchline. They met at Gigi's Cabaret. Howard had been coming in for years, drawn to the performers not for sex, but for attention. He saw something in Anna, her sadness, her ambition, her performance of innocence wrapped in siren's gloss. He began giving her gifts, jewelry, cars, cash. He bought her a home. She, in turn, gave him a fantasy, perhaps the last real thing he could feel. He proposed more than once before she said yes. When they married, Howard was already being pushed in and out of hospitals. His skin looked like paper, and his voice came in gasps. And then, 13 months later, he was dead. The legal war began before the body was cold. Howard's son, E. Pierce Marshall, contested everything. He said Anna had manipulated his father, seduced him in his final months for inheritance. Anna claimed Howard had promised her half his estate, even though she wasn't in the will. The case would stretch over a decade, reaching federal courts, twisting through allegations of forgery, elder abuse, and fraud. It wasn't just about money. It was about legitimacy, who Anna was, what her love was worth, whether she was a cartoon villain or a tragic woman clinging to the only man who had ever treated her like more than a joke. She never apologized for loving Howard, but the world never forgave her for it either. And the trial became theater. Anna in black veils. Anna crying on the stand. Anna falling asleep in court, pills numbing her into something waxen. She once said in a deposition, "I didn't marry Howard for his money. I married him because he rescued me." But rescue stories often end in betrayal. At the center of it all was a ring, said to be worth over $80,000. Anna wore it on her left hand long after Howard's death, as though clinging to a version of herself only he believed in. The ring became a symbolic motif, the loop that had no break, the circle that promised eternity but delivered scandal. Her relationship with Howard was easy to mock, but there was a strange poetry in it too. Two people out of time, he, nearing the end, she, still inventing herself, trying to make something real out of illusion. Psychologists might have called it father projection. Sociologists might have called it survival. But the emotional core remained. Anna had found someone who looked at her and saw more than hunger. In that mirror, briefly, she existed. The court would eventually strip her of most claims. The press would make her a punchline, and the myth of the gold digger would stick like lacquer. But in late-night interviews, when the makeup cracked and her voice dropped low, Anna would still whisper his name like a ghost she couldn't stop believing in. Howard had once told her, "You're my flame in the dark," but flames, by nature, burn out. By the early 2002, Anna Nicole Smith was no longer just a woman, she was a brand. A meme before memes existed. She had become what the tabloids demanded. Messy, voluptuous, unstable, addictive. Trim Spa made her the face of transformation. In the ads, she posed in black, twisting her waist, blowing kisses to a nation obsessed with her rise and waiting for her fall. "Trim Spa, baby," she'd purr, her voice slurred like syrup, eyes vacant or wild depending on the edit. The weight loss was real. The pain behind it, deeper. Behind the glittery commercial persona lived a woman increasingly hollowed by grief, pills, and attention that only knew how to devour. Fame, once a promise of rebirth, had curdled into performance. Her reality show, The Anna Nicole Show, aired like a parody of itself. Slow-moving, chaotic, equal parts comedy and tragedy. But viewers couldn't look away. They laughed when she stumbled through her words, cried over misplaced shoes, slurred in interviews, fell asleep mid-sentence. They watched without knowing how far she had fallen. Her body became the battleground online. Forums dissected her every pound gained or lost. Was she pregnant or overdosing? Was she high or just being Anna? The public couldn't decide. Howard K. Stern, now her lawyer, manager, and constant companion, remained by her side like a shadow. He was calm, stone-faced, unfazed by the storm around her. But many began to wonder, was he her protector or her warden? She rarely went anywhere alone. Her phone calls were screened. Interviews were granted only when heavily controlled. And yet, she smiled. That same gigantic showgirl smile that stretched like elastic across her face so wide. It seemed to defy the exhaustion in her eyes. Those close to her spoke of a woman drifting further from reality. She began seeing a spiritualist. She believed Daniel, her son, was communicating with her from beyond. She once asked a friend if it was possible for a soul to climb back into a baby. By this point, her daughter, Danny Lynn, had been born. The paternity was in dispute, Howard Stern claimed to be the father, but so did a photographer, Larry Burkhead, and whispers swirled of others. Even Anna seemed unsure. She had retreated to the Bahamas to escape the press, but there was no peace. Only more lawsuits, more demands, more fog. One of her last photos, taken before Daniel's death, shows her cradling her newborn in a hospital bed, makeup half smeared, expression unreadable. Daniel is beside her, thin, awkward, smiling nervously. Within hours, he would be dead. The motif of sleep began to dominate her life. She slept during the day, gave interviews in the dark. She relied on methadone, sleeping pills, anti-anxiety medication prescribed by multiple doctors across multiple countries. Friends said she was often disoriented, forgetting simple things, misplacing objects, slurring words even when sober. But no one intervened with force. Perhaps they feared losing access. Perhaps they were addicted to the circus, too. And so, Anna Nicole Smith drifted through days like a sleepwalker, trapped inside a cartoon version of herself that the world had drawn and refused to let her erase. A doll, in her own dollhouse. There's a strange ache in watching someone vanish in slow motion. It isn't the fall that hurts, it's the forgetting. And Anna, in her final months before everything collapsed, seemed to understand this. She once said, in a rare lucid moment, "It's hard to keep being something when you don't know what the thing was supposed to be." Trimspa had promised transformation, but transformation without healing is just another costume. In the dim hospital room, surrounded by pale blue walls and the low beeping of machines, Anna Nicole Smith was holding life in one arm and death in the other. It was the 7th of September, 2006. She had just given birth to her daughter, Danielyn, in the Bahamas. Her son, Daniel Wayne Smith, had flown in to see his new baby sister. 19 years old, gangly and quiet, Daniel had always been her shadow, her center of gravity, the only constant through the storms. He came bearing a soft smile and a borrowed camera, snapping photos of the newborn, sitting beside his mother as she cradled the infant. There are pictures from that day, frozen moments, where Anna is grinning, exhausted and glowing, her son leaning close to her, as though anchoring her in joy. But less than 24 hours later, Daniel was dead. Slumped in a hospital chair, his face pale, his lips tinted blue. He had overdosed beside her, quietly, while the baby slept. What happened in those hours remains one of the strangest, most disturbing turns in the Anna Nicole Smith story. He had taken a combination of methadone, Zoloft, and Lexapro, all legally prescribed, but toxic when mixed. Some reports say Anna woke to find him cold. Others claim he died while she slept beside him, and she didn't know until nurses came in. The details blurred, obscured by shock and trauma. Witnesses said she screamed so hard she had to be sedated, that she climbed into the hospital bed and refused to let them take his body, that she tried to resuscitate him with her own hands, sobbing his name. The image was haunting. A mother, freshly postpartum, blood still drying, holding her dead son in one arm and her newborn in the other. A grotesque symmetry. Life arriving even as life fled. Daniel had always seemed older than his age, quiet, observant, often described as shy, deeply protective of his mother. He hated the cameras. He distrusted Howard Stern. Friends said he worried about the people around her, the pills, the chaos. He had plans, film school, maybe law. He wanted to step out of her shadow, not ride in it. Some said he had become depressed, maybe even suicidal. Others insisted he was clean, that he had taken something to help him sleep after a long flight, and something else to soothe his nerves. Anna refused to believe he had killed himself. "I know my son," she told a friend. "He wouldn't leave me like that." The Bahamian coroner ruled it an accidental overdose. But conspiracy grew like mold in the corners. Why did he have access to those specific pills? Why was methadone Anna's drug present in his system? Was it hers? Was it switched? Howard K. Stern was in the room at the time of death. But his story shifted. Sometimes he was asleep, sometimes in the hallway. Sometimes he'd left and come back. No one could say who had last seen Daniel alive. The motif of doubling clung to the tragedy. Daniel and Danielyn, two children, side by side in Anna's arms, one breathing in, the other gone. Later, Anna would say she believed Daniel's spirit had climbed inside her baby, that he wasn't truly gone. Her grief was not linear, it was spectral, hallucinatory. She set up a shrine in her Bahamas home. She spoke of Daniel constantly, sometimes as if he were still in the next room. Psychologists might call it dissociation, a defense mechanism against unfathomable loss. But in her world of mirrors, fame, and distortion, it was also the only logic that made sense. How could her child, her anchor, her witness, her protector be taken without warning, right beside her, while joy bloomed in her arms? What kind of cruel symmetry was this? The Bahamas gave her a plot in a peaceful cemetery overlooking the sea. She buried him there, alone, far from Texas, far from anyone but the ghosts she carried. In interviews after his death, Anna's voice became softer, slower, slurred beyond recognition. The sparkle in her eyes dimmed to something dull and broken. Daniel was gone. And though Anna lived for a few more months, it could be argued that she died beside him that morning too. Only her body stayed behind. In the days after Daniel's funeral, Anna Nicole stopped speaking in complete sentences. Her voice grew syrupy, fragmented like someone drifting between waking and dream. She rarely left her bed. She breastfed her newborn daughter in a fog of sedatives and whispered lullabies to the empty spaces in the room. But those who came close enough swore she had started to see Daniel. Not in visions, at least not the kind that fade, but in Danielyn's face. She has his eyes, Anna told a visitor, cradling the baby as if she might shatter. He's in there. He came back to me. It sounded like grief, but it also sounded like belief. In her Bahamas home, a rented pink mansion tucked behind heavy gates, Anna lived in near isolation, surrounded only by a few chosen figures. Howard K. Stern was ever present, hovering at the periphery. A nanny helped with the baby. A bodyguard lingered in the hallway, but the energy inside the house shifted. It wasn't just mourning, it was a haunting. Daniel's photo sat beside the crib. His ashes remained in an urn on a velvet shelf in the bedroom. Anna kept his clothes folded in a dresser. She began calling Danielyn by both names, Daniel baby, or little Danny. When she walked past mirrors, she'd pause not to fix her hair, but as if listening for something. The motif of reflection persisted, though now distorted. In a house full of polished surfaces, nothing looked quite real anymore. Meanwhile, outside the mansion, a legal firestorm was gathering. Two men had filed paternity claims. Howard K. Stern, who was listed on the birth certificate, and Larry Burkhead, a Los Angeles photographer who had been romantically involved with Anna the year prior. The world watched the headlines like a slow-motion car crash. Who is the father? Who owns the child? Who will inherit the millions? The speculation was vicious. Anna denied Larry access to the baby. She claimed he was a fame seeker, abusive, jealous. He claimed Anna was being controlled, that Howard had isolated her, drugged her, warped her sense of reality. Lawyers in 3 countries began preparing for what would become a custody war, and possibly a fortune. But inside the house, Anna remained frozen in grief. She rarely answered her phone. She ignored court summons. Her weight fluctuated dramatically. Her skin grew sallow. Her speech, once breathy and flirtatious, now wandered like a broken melody. She held Danielyn like a lifeline, or like a substitute. God took Daniel, she said once, rocking the child in a hotel room. But he left me her. Some close to Anna began to suspect she was unraveling beyond repair. Friends were kept at a distance. Her mother, Virgie, attempted to visit and was turned away at the gate. Howard controlled the logistics. Who saw her, what she took, what she signed. But even he seemed overwhelmed. There were whispers that Anna was sleeping 15 hours a day, sometimes more. that she took medications meant for terminal patients, that she cried out in her sleep. And yet, in public appearances, few though they were, Anna painted on the smile. Thick lashes, bleached hair, red lips. The same old glamour draped like a costume over grief. She posed for photos with her baby. She did a few interviews halting, vacant, but always smiling when prompted. The same smile, too big, too bright, as if part of her knew the show couldn't stop. Not yet. Psychologically, what Anna endured was a form of complicated grief, a mourning so intense and unresolved, it begins to bend reality. But in her case, it became something deeper. The lines between her son and her daughter, between life and memory, between protection and possession blurred. She believed Daniel was not gone, and in the quiet hours, she would press her face to Danny Lynn's cheek and whisper, "You're not going to leave me too." But the human heart, for all its hope, cannot resurrect the dead. It can only fracture under their weight. The prescription bottles filled a plastic grocery bag, 20 in all, jumbled together with no clear order, labels bearing more than one name. Some were hers, some weren't. Some were written to Howard Stern, others to Alexandra Dane, a known alias. When investigators began logging the contents of Anna Nicole Smith's medicine cabinet, the numbers didn't just raise eyebrows, they raised alarms. Over 600 pills had been prescribed to her in the last month alone. Only a fraction remained. At the center of this pharmaceutical fog was a triangle of men orbiting Anna. Howard K. Stern, the ever-present legal guardian, now listed as both her partner and father of her child. Dr. Christine Eroshevich, her psychiatrist, who flew to the Bahamas carrying suitcases full of medications, and Dr. Sandeep Kapoor, a Beverly Hills physician who prescribed sedatives and opioids without ever meeting her in person. These weren't just caretakers. They were gatekeepers controlling access, mood, and movement. And by the end, they were the only ones left at her side. Howard Stern was seen as both loyal and opaque. He slept in the same house, sometimes the same room. He signed legal documents on her behalf. He was often the one picking up prescriptions, shuttling between pharmacies using different names. To some, he was a lifeline. To others, a jailer. Anna seemed to trust him, but also leaned into him with the limp weight of dependency. He fed her, dressed her, spoke for her when her speech was slurred beyond coherence. He was in the room the morning Daniel died. He was present during most of her breakdowns, and yet he never blinked for the cameras. When asked about Anna's spiraling health, Stern replied in clipped, emotionless phrases. "She's fine. She's grieving. She's sleeping." But Anna wasn't fine. The motif of the key emerges here, literal and symbolic. Keys to the house, to her prescriptions, to her voice. Anna was surrounded by men who had the keys, and none of them ever seemed to open the door. In the final weeks of her life, Anna was flying between the Bahamas and Florida, seeking medical treatments, grieving, avoiding subpoenas. Her weight dropped again. Her face appeared bloated, eyes glassy, speech delayed. There are video clips chilling in hindsight where she stares vacantly into a camera, a smile stretching slowly across her face as if lifted by invisible strings. When asked how she's doing, she responds, "Floating." In mid-January 2007, Anna appeared at the Seminole Hard Rock Hotel in Florida with Danny Lynn, Stern, and a small entourage. They checked into room 607. She was there for a photo shoot and to buy a boat, but she was sick. She had a fever of 105, a case of stomach flu, or perhaps an abscess from injections. Stern reportedly brought in antibiotics, but no doctor saw her in person. She refused the hospital. By the 7th of February, she could barely walk. She slurred. She asked for Pedialyte and ice. She took a nap, and then she was gone. The nurse found her on the floor the next day. The autopsy would later say she died of combined drug toxicity, a cocktail of chloral hydrate, Ativan, Klonopin, and other sedatives, all prescribed, all legal, all lethal when taken together. The strange thing? Most of the prescriptions weren't in her name. No one was ever charged with her death. But in the years that followed, Dr. Kapoor, Dr. Aroshevich, and Howard K. Stern were brought to trial in California for conspiracy to prescribe controlled substances under false names. All pleaded not guilty. All claimed they were protecting her. Kapoor was acquitted. Stern and Aroshevich received probation, but in that courtroom, the real defendant Anna's life was dissected, and no one could agree on the cause of death that mattered most. Not what killed her body, but what broke her will to live. There's a particular kind of silence that follows the question, who let this happen? Not a scream, not an accusation, just the hush of complicity. Anna Nicole Smith was not poisoned in one day. She was erased, slowly, methodically, by those who said they loved her, and none of them ever handed her the key back. The curtains had been drawn shut against the Florida sunlight, but nothing could stop the heat from seeping in. The air was thick, sour with sweat and perfume, damp from condensation on untouched water bottles. In room 607 of the Seminole Hard Rock Hotel, time had lost its way. Anna was alone when the nurse returned from her morning errands and found her on the floor. Face pale, mouth slightly open, limbs twisted in a pose that suggested she'd tried to rise or to fall. The room was still. No signs of violence, no screams, just the buzz of the air conditioning, and a silence so complete it felt unnatural. Her robe had slipped off one shoulder. A bottle of chloral hydrate, a powerful sedative, once used in the 1,800 for insomnia, sat uncapped nearby. She had been taking it for sleep. Mixed with benzodiazepines, it formed a toxic lullaby. There were remnants of meals she never finished. A half-eaten hamburger, a cold plate of shrimp, a melted chocolate bar smeared across a napkin. Her baby daughter was not there. Howard K. Stern had taken Danny Lynn to another suite. According to reports, Anna had been ill for days, shivering, weak, running a high fever. She refused to see a doctor. Howard, allegedly, brought her antibiotics, but no hospital visit was ever arranged. The nurse said Anna was not herself. She could barely speak. Her eyes seemed glazed, tracking sounds that weren't there. And yet no one called for emergency help, not until her body stopped moving. The motif of neglect becomes a scream in this scene. Not just of medical failure, but human absence. She was surrounded, but no one saw her. She was attended, but no one intervened. A woman deteriorating in plain sight. At 1:38 p.m., a 911 call was placed. Paramedics arrived, shocked to discover the identity of the unresponsive woman on the floor. They attempted CPR, defibrillation, intubation. Nothing worked. She was pronounced dead at 2:49 p.m., aged 39. News broke within hours. Reporters crowded the hotel lobby. Paparazzi perched on balconies. Guests in nearby rooms filmed the gurney being rolled out, Anna's body hidden beneath a white sheet. In a moment both tragic and grotesquely familiar, she became a headline again. Anna Nicole Smith found dead. Many thought it was a hoax. Others shrugged. It was bound to happen, but something about it felt unfinished. Too quiet, too sterile. No suicide note, no dramatic gesture, just a body. And questions. So many questions. Why was she alone? Why hadn't anyone called a doctor sooner? Why was she taking a 19th century sedative in 2007? Why were prescriptions written under fake names? Why had her temperature been dangerously high for days, and no one insisted on a hospital? The medical examiner listed the cause as accidental overdose, but the deeper cause remained elusive. Loneliness, trauma, neglect, or simply a woman too exhausted to resist the waves any longer. That night, the room remained sealed for investigation. Guests reported that the hallway outside was cold, unnaturally still. Housekeeping would later recall that the mirrors in the room were unusually spotless, as if someone had wiped them clean before leaving. No fingerprints were ever questioned. No time of death could be determined precisely. No final words were recovered, just a silence that clung to the walls like humidity. In dreams, people sometimes describe falling, not from cliffs or planes, but gently through water or smoke. Anna's death felt like that. Not a crash, a disappearance. She didn't die like Marilyn. She didn't leave poetry or pills lined up on a bathroom sink. She simply vanished. A body surrounded by evidence. A life surrounded by noise. And yet, when it ended, no one had heard it coming. Room 607 became more than a place. It became a symbol of fame's final stop, of a performance that never got an encore, of a woman whose story no one finished reading because they were too busy staring at the pictures. She was gone, but the courtroom buzzed like she was still in the hallway late, disoriented, wrapped in sunglasses too big for her face. The trial was not about who killed Anna Nicole Smith. No one had been charged with murder. No smoking gun. No dramatic confession. But something had gone terribly wrong. And now, in a sterile Los Angeles courtroom lit with cold fluorescence, the fragments of her life were picked over like remains. Prescriptions, videos, voicemails, love letters, medical charts, text messages, security footage. They called it a conspiracy trial, but it was more than that. It was a dissection, a posthumous interrogation of how a woman could be so famous, so surrounded, and yet so utterly unprotected. At the heart of it were three figures: Howard K. Stern, her lawyer and partner in her final months; Dr. Christine Eroshevich, her psychiatrist; Dr. Sandeep Kapoor, her prescribing physician. They were charged with illegally obtaining controlled substances for Anna using fake names, often Stern's too. The prosecution argued they had created a fog of medications to maintain control, that they enabled her addiction. The defense claimed compassion, that they were trying to keep her alive in the only way she would allow, that without them, she would have spiraled sooner. The trial dragged on for months. The public watched with fascination, but also fatigue. Another celebrity tragedy. Another set of blurred lines. But beneath the surface was something deeper, a reckoning with power and identity. Who owned Anna Nicole Smith? Was she a client? A patient? A partner? A paycheck? Did she ever get to be a person? In court, they played clips from her reality show. One moment she was weeping uncontrollably. The next, giggling at nothing. They read text messages she sent in her final weeks. "I feel dead already. They only love me when I smile." One expert witness said Anna's prescriptions resembled a terminal cancer patient, not a woman in her 30s. Another called her drug regimen pharmacological homicide. And yet, no one could agree on what exactly had gone wrong. She had asked for the pills. She had begged not to go to the hospital. She had refused help. Was that autonomy? Or the last flicker of control in a life long dominated by others? The question hung in the courtroom like smoke. Howard Stern sat expressionless through most of it. He denied wrongdoing, said he loved her, said he never profited from her pain. The jury struggled. The charges were complex, the facts murky. Eventually, Stern was convicted of conspiracy, but the conviction was thrown out. The judge ruled there was no intent to commit a crime. Dr. Eroshevich received probation. Dr. Kapoor was acquitted. No one went to jail. And yet, Anna Nicole Smith remained dead, and her story, somehow, felt unresolved. The motif of silence returned here, not just the silence of death, but of the system. There was no villain with a knife, no smoking syringe, just a string of choices, accommodations, dependencies, justifications woven into a noose no one noticed until it was too late. And perhaps that is the horror. That Anna didn't die against the will of others. She died within it, surrounded by people who loved her, or said they did, or thought they did. And in that courtroom, where her name was spoken again and again loud, clipped, over-enunciated, it became harder and harder to remember who she really was. Not a Playboy model, not a tabloid joke, not a defendant, but a mother, a daughter, a woman once named Vicky who had whispered into mirrors at 17, "You're going to be someone." And now she was. Someone dissected, someone judged, someone lost. She was buried in the Bahamas, beneath a soft layer of sand not far from where her son lay. The coffin was white, the service private. Photographs captured Howard Stern, standing at the edge of the grave, holding her infant daughter, both cloaked in black. A pink headstone would later be placed at her grave, simple and polished. The inscription read, "Loving mother, devoted friend, cherished soul." But the woman beneath the stone was already myth. Anna Nicole Smith had become too many things, to too many people: fantasy, tragedy, gold digger, goddess, addict, survivor, joke. And in the years after her death, those fragments scattered further. Her image still floated across late-night talk shows and tabloid retrospectives, always framed with a smirk. They replayed the falls, the slurs, the awkward interviews, the spectacle of a woman slowly imploding while the world watched with popcorn. But behind the clips were real things. A daughter born into chaos, a son buried in quiet, a mother still searching for answers, a name written in court documents more than journals. Danny Lynn Hope Marshall Stern became the last and most silent chapter. She was just 5 months old when her mother died. She would grow up in Kentucky, raised by her biological father, Larry Burkhead, far from the glare of Los Angeles and Nassau. He kept her mostly out of the spotlight, appearing occasionally at the Kentucky Derby or in family magazines. And in her face, the world looked for echoes. Daniel's eyes, Anna's smile, a softness not yet weathered by fame. She would inherit what her mother never fully held, a portion of J. Howard Marshall's fortune, won after years of legal battle. But more than money, she inherited a ghost. The ghost of a woman whose beauty dazzled but whose pain never dimmed. In documentaries and essays, Anna is now discussed like a riddle. Was she in control or always controlled? Was her downfall self-inflicted, or the natural result of a world that builds women up only to watch them collapse in slow motion? A philosopher might say she represented the cost of performance, what happens when the line between self and image dissolves. A psychologist might call it unresolved trauma, magnified through fame and pharmaceuticals. A mother might just see a daughter who never came home. The final motif in her story is absence, the echo of a voice that was always too breathy, too soft, and finally fell completely silent. The mirrors are gone. The house is sold. The trial is over. But her image remains, suspended in that strange half-place where dead celebrities reside, too familiar to forget, too distorted to fully remember. She once said, when asked what she feared most, being alone and nobody loving me. And maybe that's what her story always circled around. Not fame or money or scandal, but a hunger for connection so deep that no camera could capture it. No court could resolve it. What remains of Anna Nicole Smith is not just a life, but a warning of how easy it is to mistake a woman's body for a brand, of how quickly a girl's dream can become her sentence, of how even with lights flashing, names printed, and wealth earned, a person can disappear before your very eyes. In the final footage of Anna, filmed weeks before her death, she's holding Danny Lynn. There's no makeup. Her hair is messy. She's singing softly. The baby stares at her, blinking. And Anna smiles, quiet, real, fleeting, as if, for a moment, she remembered who she had been. Not a headline, not a cartoon, not a tragedy. Just Vicky, just a mother, rocking her child, waiting for sleep.